Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. With the transfer portal opening back up over the next couple of weeks, want to dive back into this Michigan roster and talk about a few positions that we might want to see Michigan add through the transfer portal over those next couple of weeks. But Dill, kind of to start this conversation, I think a lot of Michigan fans probably agree with this. You look at this roster, it's ready to rock and roll heading into 2024. I think if we see any transfer portal additions, I think it's really going to be focused on really just elevating the ceiling of what this Michigan team can be in 2024. You know you can win a lot of games with this roster. The floor is very high for this team, but what positions might Sherrone Moore and the staff go after that really kind of elevates that ceiling of this team heading into 2024? That's, in my mind, going to be the focus. Excited to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and a massive shout out to the Michigan fans. Many of y'all know the boys are massive Michigan fans, whether we're talking the recruiting trail, doing film deep dives. The amount of support the Michigan fans have shown the boys the last couple of months truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And much more importantly, would love to hear some of your positions and kind of feedback on what positions you would like to see Michigan go after as well. I know there is a lot of different opinions out there at a lot of different position groups. Would love to hear from you guys in the comments section. And Dale, I'm going to give you the tee box. Let's start with the story for this Michigan offseason. That's the quarterback room. You look at this quarterback room, do you think Michigan needs to add a quarterback heading into 2024?
No, honestly, no. And part of the reason, frankly, is you kind of think about who's going to hit in the spring. I just don't think you're going to get those top tier guys, like guys who come in and are like no question adds to your roster. It's like they're going to be guys who lose a spring battle to an opposing quarterback. And frankly, you haven't had a ton of success with that type of guy. I mean, you look across the country, like these spring quarterback ads. Think about Peyton Thorne at Auburn. It's just too late in the game, I feel like, to really put your quarterback in and hope to rely on that guy to be your starter. And if that's not kind of what Michigan's looking at, I don't see how that's really worth adding in the portal at this point.
Yeah, I think there's two arguments about it. One, you look at this Michigan quarterback room, and there's five guys that you kind of feel like at least two or three of them are going to kind of emerge as quarterbacks that you can win a lot of football games with. But I think the second argument is exactly what you said. You look at the type of names that are going to be in the transfer portal during this spring window. It's going to be a lot of guys that didn't win their jobs. And I also hate the idea of bringing in a quarterback that misses all of spring practice, because I think you made a really good point. You look at a guy like Peyton Thorne, a late ad for Auburn, that offense just looked like it wasn't really glued in together. You want your quarterbacks in for spring practice, and again, the combination of the quality of player probably not going to be all that great. And then you combine that Michigan has a lot of quarterbacks in this room that you think can win football games for us. I kind of look at that quarterback room and say the same thing. Probably don't need to add anybody in that quarterback room. You look at
the only caveat I feel like is if somebody like an Arch Manning or a Dante Moore, like guys who are sitting behind very proven vets, if either though like somebody like that wants to leave, I mean, you're crazy to not take a look. Almost every team in the country should take a look if that type of guy wants to leave. But at the end of the day, I just don't really see that being that practical. I mean, again, if it happens, you maybe revisit it then. But again, what I kind of think will be in the portal is not going to be that type of guy. It won't be a game changer. And if they're not a game changer, I really don't think Michigan.
100% agree. If Michigan's adding a quarterback in this spring portal window, it does need to be a guy like, hey, that's a bona fide starter. That is going to elevate our team significantly, kind of no questions asked. And you're right. We'll probably revisit this conversation as we start hearing some names that enter the portal. You look at the running back room, no questions about that. We're ready to rock and roll in that position. Now, the real position on the offensive side of the football that I'll probably say, yeah, we need to add in the portal, or at least I would like to see Michigan add in the transfer portal, is that wide receiver room. And I'll tell you why. One, you have some guys that I'm really excited about, right? Tyler Morris, I think, is in for a breakout year. Samaj Morgan, as a true freshman, really flashed some dynamic ability with the football in his hands. My argument for Michigan adding a wide receiver in the transfer portal, and a lot of the Michigan fans said this in the comment section last week, was we don't really have a wide receiver that's a big body that can win vertically down the field. And you look at this Michigan offense with how much they want to run the football, safeties coming in the box. You want that wide receiver that really can access that deeper third of the football field. And I look at this Michigan wide receiver room and I say, I like Tyler Morris. I like Samaj Morgan, but you look at their skill sets, They're kind of short, intermediate route tree kind of guys that want to operate after the catch. You want wide receivers that can give you a little bit of juice at different points. And I look at this wide receiver room and I say, I don't see a wide receiver that really can access that deeper third. So if we see a wide receiver hit the portal that can kind of fill that void in, that's probably where I'm looking for if I'm the Michigan staff.
And you already kind of saw, I think they were kicking the tires a little bit on a guy like Jamal Banks from Wake Forest. Kind of perfectly sums up what you want. Again, a lot of really good guys working underneath and really good athletes. And honestly, Frederick Moore, like, we don't know that much about him. Obviously, he didn't get a ton of shots last year, but he could be that guy. I mean, a little bit bigger, a little bit longer, a little bit maybe able to be that guy to work downfield. But again, you just don't have it really proven. And that is kind of what the portal is for in my mind. If you're a team like Michigan where you're mostly complete for the most part, and you can take a shot at a guy who's a little bit more proven. And frankly, if your young guy beats him out, like, all the better. But again, you look, if there's a guy who hits like what you were describing, what a Jamal Banks is like, I certainly think it's worth looking at because, again, it does round out the room.
I think that's a good point because you look at the transfers that Michigan was going after in the winter portal. It was those big body receivers that excelled down the field, right? Jamal Banks, Donovan McCulley at Indiana. Those were the two wide receivers with a lot of buzz around their names. That's probably where Michigan's looking for. My last argument is, know who's going to benefit the most when you're adding a big body on the boundary? Guys like Colston Loveland who want to work the middle of the field. When you have kind of limited ability to access that deeper third with some wide receivers that can threaten defenses, it makes the middle of the field a little bit more muddy. And so you want to create a little bit more space for by far our most dangerous weapon on the offensive side of the football in Colston Loveland. So if you can add that wide receiver, not only can he maybe hit some more explosive plays 20-plus yards down the field, Colston Loveland is going to continue to eat over the middle of the field as well. Offensive line, check. I really think we have a deep offensive line. I think you're seeing a lot of good position battles. Really no need to add any offensive linemen.
You don't think if a kind of guy like a Miles Hinton hit like one of those more veteran tackles, you don't think there's a shot Michigan to look like Darius Henderson?
They did last year, right? We were comfortable after Michigan wrapped up their 2022 year. We're saying, hey, we like Carson Barnhart, Trente Jones. What does Sherrone Moore and this Michigan staff do? They go out and grab two offensive tackles in Miles Hinton and Ladarius Henderson. Dill, I think my opinion on this is I feel good about it. I don't think Michigan needs to be desperate to add any offensive linemen, but you make a good point. Like, Sherrone Moore is not going to pass up an opportunity to go grab a tackle or an offensive lineman in general that's going to make this team better, right? Michigan wins along the offensive line. So that's a really good point. If you do
I just look, I mean, I like Andrew Gentry at tackle. I think he's going to be one of those guys. I think it'll probably be Miles Hinton on the left, Andrew Gentry on the right, and I like what Andrew Gentry has. But I look kind of after him. I'm not really sure you have a ton of faith in throwing out one of those other guys. And again, Evan Link, a younger guy you hope develops, Tristan Bounds and Jeffrey Percy. I just don't think we've seen enough to make me think like I want either of those two starting at offensive tackle, especially, again, when you're like in a Michigan world where you have a defense that's as good as it's supposed to be. I mean, if a good experienced tackle hits, even if it's just a depth piece, I think Michigan.
And at the end of the day, it's such a good spot. Like, you look across the country with Power 5 teams, even elite Power 5 programs, a lot of them are kind of desperate for offensive tackles. Michigan is not in that situation. Like, we're very comfortable trotting out what we have at offensive line. So it would be kind of gravy, but you make a good point. It is the most attractive destination for an offensive lineman to come boost your NFL draft stock. Wouldn't be surprised to see Sherrone Moore kick it around because, again, he knows how Michigan wins. That's along the line of scrimmage. So I think that's a good point. We maybe could see Michigan add on the offensive line. Now, going to the defensive side of the football, Dill, starting on the defensive line, I think two things have been really encouraging this spring practice, right? We knew that Derek Moore, Kenny Grant, Mason Graham, Josiah Stewart, that probably makes up the most dominant four-man front that you see in college football, especially on the inside. A lot of our questions heading into spring practice was, what does the depth look like after that? You're starting to hear TJ Guy kind of become a dog. You're starting to hear Eno Etta on the inside kind of become a dog. Cameron Brandt getting a lot of buzz out of spring practice. I feel a lot more comfortable with the depth of this defensive line as we sit right now, as opposed to 4 weeks ago before spring practice started. So I look at this defensive line and say, think this group's ready to rock and roll heading into 2024.
I mean, there's just no room for. I just don't
Yeah.
see that much room for guys to come in, especially guys who are difference makers. And again, I don't
Yeah.
think Michigan is really that team that takes a lot of guys just to take them.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know what difference maker wants to come in because you, at the end of the day, know this front four is the front four, and there's really no one who's beating these guys out unless, again, if it's like the type of guy in the portal is not beating out Kenny Graham.
I think I agree. Like, it's going to be such a tough sell. Like, if there's a really good defensive line in the portal, yeah, you're probably not starting for this Michigan defense. Now, you might play a lot, but you're probably not starting. So it's going to be a tough sell to get some really good defensive linemen to come to Michigan. But again, we'll see who hits the portal. Linebacker, the spring reports around Sherrone Moore, extremely encouraging. And we talked about this. When you pair up a dominant defensive line that Michigan has with two linebackers that I think have, I'd argue that Sherrone Moore and Ernest Hausman potentially have a higher ceiling than guys like Mikey Barrett. I mean, I love Mike Barrett, but these two guys are kind of difference makers at that linebacker spot. I am very excited for very good linebackers playing behind a very good defensive line. That front seven, to me, you kind of feel good about. You're hearing some good things about Jimmy Rolder if he can stay healthy. I think the conversation on the defensive side of the football resides in the secondary. And this is where it gets contested with Michigan fans. We talked about when Rod Moore went down with the injury, we said, should Michigan go to the portal and add some guys into this defensive back room? Would love to hear from the Michigan fans in the comment section. Dill, I'll give you the first word, then I'll give you my take.
I honestly still don't think so. I think you're comfortable letting Brandon Hillman and Zeke Berry battle out for that safety too. And frankly, you still have Quentin Johnson in that room, who, again, I'm not sure he's a bona fide starter at Michigan. I mean, a really, really good player for sure. I'm not sure I don't. It's hard to say. I just don't know that he's.
I would disagree with that. I think Quentin Johnson played some great football. Like, I think he is probably
played really good in spot starts, but again, I just think there does seem like an athletic cap that maybe he has that you don't see from some of the other starters that Michigan had, and that, frankly, probably keeping him off the field to some extent. So I think he does provide you good depth and versatility to play the way Michigan wants to play, where they can vary their personnel. But I think you're comfortable with those two young guys battling out and seeing if one of them can take a step and kind of establish themselves.
So yeah, diving into that safety room in my mind is, I don't personally don't think we need to add a safety in this room because, one, Makari Page, dog. Two, for that competition, for that other safety spot, in my mind, that's exactly how you want a competition to look, where you know what you have with Quentin Johnson. He's another guy that you can win a lot of football games with him playing back there. I thought he played very, very good in 2023, but then you sprinkle in a guy like Zeke Berry or potentially a guy like Brandon Hillman, who, you're probably right, offer a little bit more upside from an athleticism standpoint, especially a guy like Zeke Berry. That's how you want it to look. High floor with Quentin Johnson, high ceiling with guys like Hillman and Zeke Berry. I feel good about what Michigan has in that safety room. I think the next conversation is the cornerback room. I think Jaden McBurrow is really starting to separate himself as that nickel defender. We have no question marks about Will Johnson. On the other side, I guess I'll start off. I feel like you're pretty good here with Jair Hill and DJ Waller. Now, could you see Michigan do a very similar thing where, hey, we like the progression of Jair Hill, DJ Waller? Remember last year, there's a lot of buzz around Marion Walker. And it's like, oh, he just didn't really quite pan out. He wasn't ready to be the guy in 2023. So what does Michigan do? Quick pivot, goes and gets Josh Wallace. I could see Michigan doing the same thing. Sherrone Moore in that defensive coaching staff know how Jair Hill and DJ Waller are progressing. They know if they're going to be ready by 2024. If they're not ready, you might add a cornerback. But at the end of the day, Jair Hill, DJ Waller battling it out. If you're Michigan, you feel pretty good about that as well.
Yeah, but I'm kind of with you, frankly. I just knowing how well that Josh Wallace move worked out, and again, what you kind of heard, like when they were saying Marion Walker was like going to be that guy, and you kind of could frankly see in the spring game and some of the other his spot starts. It's like, I'm not sure Michigan's the same defense if they don't have Josh Wallace. So again, we don't know it. We're not watching every day, I feel like, in practice. But if they think that it's worth adding a second corner, it certainly wouldn't bother me. I wouldn't mind the move. But I mean, you are right. Like, you look, there are two really talented guys who, again, they feel like they have that juice. And again, I mean, that doesn't mean you have it, because we heard the same things about Walker last year. But if they think they need to add another, it really wouldn't stun me, and I wouldn't mind the move.
And I think the conversation is, all right, if we are to add a cornerback too, kind of to play on the opposite side of Will Johnson, if we're a little bit worried about Jair Hill and DJ Waller being ready, it'd have to be a guy like Josh Wallace, who had played a ton of football at UMass coming in. You knew what you had, right? He wasn't going to be a top first-round pick, but you knew he was going to be a damn good cornerback. That's who you have to go after, right? There are some cornerbacks that'll hit the portal that have a lot of upside, but not much proven production. If you're adding a cornerback, in my mind, it needs to be a guy that, maybe the upside is not crazy high. He's not going to be a first-round pick, but you're going to get really good play out of him and really consistent play. That'd be the cornerback that I think we go after. And again, the caveat is, if Jair Hill and DJ Waller might need a little bit more seasoning before they're ready to play some football for Michigan, that'll do it. At the end of the day, Michigan in a phenomenal spot. You look at a lot of other Power 5 programs, they got massive holes in their roster that they need to try to add in the transfer portal. You look at Michigan, outside of that wide receiver room where I would really like to see Michigan add, you kind of feel good about what you have heading into 2024. We'll continue to have this conversation as it plays out for Michigan. Once names start hitting the portal, once some names from Michigan might hit the portal as well, we'll revisit the conversation. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas again. One, would love to hear from you all in the comment section. Two, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.